Hello, everyone. It's been a few days since I've recorded, but just been on a bit of a whirlwind driving tour through the States. And, when you're driving long hours, you got lots of time to think and to process things. And one of the videos that I got coming up actually is an interview with this woman named Lydia talking about bipolar disorder and Christianity. And I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be great. But today, the thing that's on my mind right now is just the relationship between father and sons. And it's just, I didn't quite know where to begin. And then the thought came to me that we struggle with our relationships with our fathers and our sons. And if we're honest with ourselves, that we'll have moments of that. That's not always perfect. There's not always, great, fantastic moments. There's not always bad times either. Just like any other relationship, things come and go. Things build up, things tear down, things need to be repaired, things are awesome. It can be all over the map. And one of the things I definitely noted with my own relationship with my father is that, you grow up in this environment where your father is like larger than life and he's a hero. And it remains that way until something happens that lets you down. And you start to realize that he's not your hero. He's just a man, and he makes mistakes. You don't really kind of put that together until you're older, because when you're a kid, you just simply see disappointment, possibly rejection, possibly abuse on several levels. And you don't quite wrap your mind around, well, how did this happen? And my own father being very cool and distant, and sought refuge in alcohol. I had my own little basket of goodies to deal with growing up. One of the things, though, that I came to realize as I was growing older was that my father didn't have an easy life. And, you just kind of, you have a snapshot of your father, in the sense that, okay, well, he's like this perfect human being. He's done nothing wrong. He's never had any difficulty. He's just always fabulously wealthy or whatever. He just pays for the meals. Everything happens, and it just, it's all good. But again, reality settles in, especially as you get older, and especially if you have your own kids, you start to realize that none of that's true. And he had this upbringing where in the United Kingdom, if you had an issue with promiscuity or something happened or, whatever, it wasn't tolerated or understood in any way. He had a best friend, and that best friend, he was one of these guys where, back in the 30s and 40s of the 1900s, he would still wear a kilt even though it was out of fashion, so to speak. And he was just one of those guys, just a proud Scotsman. And he was of a certain class where he fell in love with a woman who was working for, his family's house, and got her pregnant. It's like a Jane Austen story when you think about it. But he killed himself. And when I look at that, it really was the beginning of the fall of my dad. He went on to serve in the Royal Air Force, where he learned great things about masculinity and challenging things about worldly masculinity. He learned how to drink. He learned how to just soothe his own sorrows, and that led to one very difficult and challenging marriage when he came to Canada, which ended in divorce and a son that was somewhat exiled. And then met my mother, which was, really through an affair. And she had a husband and a child. And then I came along. So they got married about a year after they conceived me, and so I had this picture of my dad as, at that point, he was at the height of his social career. He was just doing really well. But I didn't see any of the brokenness and the wreckage that brought him to that place. So what I saw was a guy soothing his fears, trying to calm his emotions and his difficulties through alcoholism, and so his relationship with my mom did not end up going very well. There was physical abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, financial abuse. I could go on, and that trickled down to me as well, but in different ways. And as a son of a father like that, it was difficult to see the light of day. And I remember it wasn't until several years later, I had already moved out on my own. And somebody had given me a piece of advice, and I've actually heard this before, and I've even seen it quoted in the movie, so I actually have no idea where it came from, but that every son has to get to the place where they tell their father to, take off, and that's a very polite way of saying it. And what it means is not to insult your father, but to get to that place where you are your own man, and you recognize that you need to make your way in the world as your own man, not your father's son. Now, that doesn't mean cutting off your father. It doesn't mean, the relationship is dead. It means that it changes very naturally. And some people will use marriage as a part of that, and rightfully so. So there's a healthy way of growing into being the man you're supposed to be. And if you've had a positive male role model as a father, then actually you're probably ahead of the game from most of us. Having said that, I don't believe there is a perfect role model. There's fathers who don't talk. There's fathers who talk about trees and the weather. There's fathers who talk about sports. And then there's fathers who are completely absent. And there are fathers that maybe overshare. There are fathers that don't know how to express physical attention in a positive way or emotional attention in a positive way. There's just a lot of different kinds of fathers. And I think, as I became a father myself, I didn't have a manual. There was no rule book. Nobody came along and said, this is how you treat your kids, right? And you raise them better than you had the opportunity to be raised. In fact, it felt like a bit of a vacuum. All I knew from the get-go was try and do everything opposite that my father did to me, which sounds funny, but there were certain times where that actually was the right thing to do. And I used to have people tell me, "Oh, you're such a great dad," and it's like, no. I said, look, let's wait 20 years, and if my kids are still talking to me, then maybe we can reevaluate that comment. And it's been a lot longer than 20 years at this point. But and I wish I could say I have amazing relationships with all my kids. I love them all. I truly do. I wish that I was closer to some of them. But that's the way of things. Because the other part of it is that we have to be separate from our fathers. We have to grow beyond them. But here's the catch. When we start to accept that our fathers are human beings, like just regular red-blooded sinners, fallen people, just trying to find their way in the world, then we have to accept a couple of realities. One, that there are burdens that a man carries that no one will ever see. I've heard that quoted recently, and it's something that's stuck with me, is that a man will carry burdens that no one can see, even his wife, even his closest confidants. There are some things that just that are weights on the shoulder of a man that bear up. There are things that I'm doing right now that nobody knows about, that cost money, that cost emotional energy, cost a lot of prayer time, but they're in service of someone I love. And it's like, you do these things because it's the right thing to do, but nobody knows about it. And that's okay. But the burden is real. The stress is real. The sweat that breaks your brow is real. And it causes us to go gray early. It causes us to, die of a heart attack when we're young. It causes us to bear those weights in different ways that the world doesn't necessarily see. Part of that fault is that men need to get better, I think, at talking to one another and sharing these burdens, to know that we're not alone, even though, we show up, we do our career, we do our job, um, we do what needs to be done, we get things done. And that is something that will take a cost. It does cost something. You'll pay a price for it, but it is the right thing to do. And you end up being responsible for people that don't realize that you're being responsible for them. But that's a calling of I think being a man, and calling of being a father. So one, like I said, there's a couple of things that we have to realize once we've grown up and grown beyond our fathers, to realize that they carried burdens that we never saw. I realize now my dad was carrying the burden of not only being the financial giver to the house, but by being a shield. There was one time where I got into a bit of a fight with a bunch of kids in the alley in this one place I lived, and I'll never forget it. And yet I say that because I did forget it, but I won't now. Where because I wasn't. I've never been a small kid, so this guy that was bullying, I just took care of the situation. And his mom came to the back door to complain that even though this guy was the aggressor, that I stopped it. And my dad, without even asking a question of what happened, went to my defense, knowing my character. And he turned her away and just said, "Thanks, but no thanks. Tell your son to not bully other kids." And I was just kind of standing there going, wow, my dad's sticking up for me. Man, he's my champion. It was an important moment, but something that for some reason I had forgotten. So he carried the burden not only of financial provision, but he carried the burden of protecting. And these are things that I did not see at the time because I was blinded by grief. So we forget these good things that our fathers do. But the other burden that we have to have is that we, as sons, is that I've had to accept that my dad is a sinner like me. Or was a sinner like me. He's passed on now, and that means that imperfection needs to be redeemed, and I believe redeemed through Jesus Christ in a relationship with Him, where we've submitted our lives to Him and we've been forgiven by Him, and recognize that He paid a price for the fallen man and fallen woman in each of us, and so I didn't realize that at the time. That, as a father, you have certain things that you have to do for your children. You have to raise them up. I believe in the way that the Word has told us to raise our children, to live justly, to walk humbly, to follow the fruits of the Spirit, have them in increasing measure in our lives, to practice forgiveness instead of judgment, to live a life of mercy instead of hatred, to apply grace liberally as opposed to sparingly. These are things that we need to teach our children. And I confess I haven't always been able to do that because I'm a growing person, and I was a growing person. Would I make the same decisions then that I would make now? Yes and no. Would I have moved my family around so much? No, not at all. I realize I've made some big mistakes that way of physically, geographically moving family around too much, not allowing roots to take place in their lives with other people and also with the community. That's something that I deeply regret. But there are other decisions that I made that I do not regret. I made a choice of having a career where I could work from home, so I was available and accessible and around. And that allowed us a lot of time to go on adventures and do things that I was able to take time off to do because I had my own schedule. I don't regret that at all. I think the one challenge that comes from all of this is that sometimes familiarity breeds contempt. And so sometimes proximity is not the answer. I think it's the quality time that you have while you are with your kids. And to flip that also, I recognize that I could have spent more time reaching out to my father to treat him like a father. and I didn't do that all the while. So, look, I spent some time here talking about what not to do, but I think it's really important just that as we walk through life as fathers and sons, that we understand that there is no perfect example outside of Jesus of how to be a man. There's no perfect example of how to be a father outside of God our Father. And we will never have the strength to be the father or the son that we're meant to be without the power of the Holy Spirit in our lives. We need those three. We need that heart of hearts inside of us to be the person we're meant to be. And otherwise, we end up just simply relying on the flesh, our own willpower, easy believisms, and oh, son, it'll be all right. Slap in the back, and you know what? Sometimes life isn't all right. Sometimes it's extremely hard. And I used to say that there's a lot that I would give up to have 5 more minutes with my mom, because she passed away quite a few years ago now. And I love my mom. I had a good relationship with her, but I'm starting to come to the place where, you know what, I wish I had 5 more minutes with my dad. He was not an easy man. He wasn't a safe man necessarily. But there are a few things I wish I could look him in the eye and say, Dad, I forgive you. And who are you today? That's one of the things also that, I learned recently that, I was just last year now, I was sitting in a car with my oldest son. And we're driving a few hours, and just I hadn't seen him in a few years, like physically laid eyes on him, talked to him outside of that, of course, but we live on opposite sides of North America, and so we're driving, and I'm just like, so who have you become? You approach people with curiosity, and I think if you approach your father and your son, or your son and your father, you approach your family with curiosity, there are doors that can open that we never expected needed to be opened. Or never thought would show so much beauty because they were. So I guess just this reflection is just simply that, life is hard, life is short, call now. We won't always have our fathers with us. I don't have my parents with me anymore. And I see people all around me with their parents, and there's moments where I'm like, I'm sad, it's like, yeah, I wish I could call them up. I wish there were some amends that could be made. I wish there were some questions that I have that could be answered. So when I see people, around with their fathers and mothers, I pray sometimes, just like, Lord, help us all to see. And as a son, I've learned much from being a father. And as a father, I've also learned much, and quite often more how not to do things, looking back in retrospect. But also just gratitude that I think for my kids, I have seen strength and creativity in them that I didn't quite even know was possible, and that has been a blessing. And you start to realize how precious life is, and how precious they are, and how, for whatever reasons, for whatever act of grace or mercy, you were entrusted with these lives. So if you have kids at home right now and you're listening to this, don't waste the time. Get off your phone, get off your computer, be present, be available, be there for them. If there's anger in your heart, get it settled with. Don't try and deal with it on your own. If there's distance between you and your father, or you and your mother, figure it out. And maybe there needs to be years where you're healing, and I understand that. It took me years. But unfortunately, it's taken me beyond my dad's lifespan to be able to figure some of this out. So I guess this encouragement is just simply to look at your own situation and ask the hard questions, to forgive, and to recognize that we are all fallen beings. We all need a rescue in Jesus, and there is no perfect man, and we're all just struggling to get along with the burdens that we have. And so let's look at one another through those eyes sometime. As fathers and sons have the opportunity to be an incredible fighting force, and they also have the ability to divide families. And I think that there's a real clear path there for our enemy, our spiritual enemy, the devil, to be able to create chaos. And the Lord is about reconstruction and beauty and light and love. And I want to choose that this day. So consider what I've said, dismiss it if you will, take it to heart. But if you aren't a father, you will be one day. If you are a father right now, you have a responsibility to those who are walking behind you and following to model an imperfect man redeemed by grace, not a perfect man pretending everything is great. And if you are a son, look towards your father and recognize very imperfect guy who's got burdens that you don't even see. So, my family out there on YouTube, thank you for indulging me with this. It's just a thought of the day. And please stay tuned for my next interview. I'm really excited about it. This is going to be a very interesting one, talking about bipolar and depression and Christianity and how that all works together and the grace that we need to have for one another. And that seems to be a topic that I'm on these days, is that idea of grace and mercy for one another. So be at peace, know the Lord, and I will see you soon.